Hi everyone, welcome back to the Frances Fogel Story Strategist podcast. Very happy today to have Annie, the Sustainable Life Coach, on the show. I know Annie, who is otherwise known as Anne-Marie Soulsby, in her capacity as a trainer. Her workshop, her course, which I did recently, earned me the carbon literacy qualification, which Annie can tell you more about. I wanted to have her on the show because she does quite a number of amazing things in the space of sort of educating individuals and businesses around carbon literacy, climate change, net zero, and all sorts of things, making it very not easy to understand. There were moments on the course, weren't there, Annie, where I think we were all a bit sort of discombobulated with data, but at the same time, you come away with a really good sense of the bigger picture. So it's really important to me to have Annie on, and for businesses who might be listening to this podcast to know what the next steps might be about how to kind of do a bit more, wearing a climate change consciousness hat, let's say. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Annie, as you see fit today. Do tell us sort of what you do, and indeed how you came to do it and what your background was, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much, Frances. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me today. Wow, so where should we start? Okay, a little bit more about what I do then. Yes, you're right. I do carbon literacy training. You were brilliant on our marketing professionals course. So that was all about helping marketers avoid greenwashing and greenwashing and confidently tell the marketing story for businesses and for brands to make sure that they're not falling foul of any upcoming legal restrictions, and craft a really interesting marketing story around sustainability. I also have carbon literacy for individuals. That's about understanding personal contributions to climate change and understanding what needs to be done, and the same idea behind SMEs and small businesses as well. So micro businesses like sole traders, freelancers and entrepreneurs. That's looking at it from a business perspective. So yeah, understanding climate change and knowing what to do when it comes to looking at those emissions and how to reduce them. On top of that, I also do webinars and workshops. So that's answering sustainability questions, presenting to different groups about all sorts of things, from going plastic free to environmental well-being, and doing rapid reduction workshops to help businesses reduce their emissions and craft their sustainability stories. I also do accelerator programs, which is a real in-depth analysis of emissions over a 12-month period, and also therefore that's certified, and there's a report produced at the end, so those businesses can use that to win bids and contracts and demonstrate their net zero journey with a full nice report there. And also do a bit of coaching as well, so helping people individually, either from their own personal or from their business perspective, tackle their sustainability goals with a sort of one-to-one assistance. I call myself the personal trainer for your environmental impact. So it's a bit like, running a marathon. Some people can start tomorrow and produce their own plan and their own sort of diet and their own running agenda and their rest periods and all these kind of things. Other people need groups to be able to do that with, and some people just need a coach to help them to get there. And yes, that's how I work with people in order to address their own sustainability challenges as well. So quite a lot of varied work, which will keep you very busy and entertained as well.
Amazing.
Okay, yeah. How do I get here?
Yes.
That was the other question.
Why are you here?
Why am I here? That's always I get asked this quite a lot, Frances. So a long time ago, I was somebody who my parents always had the news on. And so therefore I was always aware of what was going on in the world. And during the 80s, there was lots of things that kept coming up that were quite, I didn't know at the time, but eco-anxiety inducing. So this is where people are, upset or emotionally challenged by things that are happening in terms of ecological disasters. So we had the hole in the ozone layer that was, a big problem. We also had the Amazon rainforest being on fire, which is still a big problem. And we also had things like the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So seeing all of these pictures and images alongside some other disasters like Chernobyl, really kind of as a sort of 12, 13-year-old young person, understood the fragility of the planet and also how it affects us and our futures, which I know a lot more young people are experiencing today. And that really kind of got me interested in that side of the world and subjects at school. I really liked geography. I wasn't too bad at biology. Chemistry wasn't my strong point, but my English teacher told my parents that I wouldn't be able to do science at A level. So I did it just to annoy her. And then because I'd chosen those three subjects, when I was looking for university places, my mum said, "Oh, why don't you do something with the environment? I think that's going to be a popular subject going forward." So I think at the time there wasn't very many courses in the UK, probably only about 10 or less than 10 that were available in terms of that was in that environmental space. And I think that we were only the second or third group of people that went through the course at Leeds as well. So I really started out with that. But unfortunately, when I graduated, there wasn't very many positions available because it was, as I said to somebody this morning, we were ahead of our time. And so therefore I went into the corporate world. I worked for 10 years for some large telecoms companies, which is why I've got a really good background in advising businesses, because I have been working with businesses and service management and account management for a long time for them. And yeah, so then I kind of was like, this isn't really floating my boat anymore. I don't feel that I've got purpose. And I really wanted to get back to my roots. So that's when I went back and did my master's, again, just to show my English teacher that I can cope with science beyond A level. And then started on a series of different projects and work experience where, still working with conservation, working with climate change, and then have combined all of that skills, knowledge, and experience and put that together to present the Sustainable Life Coach with the opportunities that I have in terms of advising businesses and connecting with people based on those sort of things that I know about and kind of do in my day-to-day life as well.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. That's a super comprehensive and yeah, makes a lot of sense now, knowing all that, which I didn't before. And I would just say that not only are you quite clearly able to cope with the science, fingers up to your English teacher, but you're also amazing at teaching it. And I was absolutely not good at science at school. I was in the bottom groups for all of the sciences. However, I seemed somehow to get my head around some kind of chemistry on your course. So that's entirely credit to you for making it palatable, communicating what needed to be learnt in a kind of timely way and without causing too much anxiety for those of us who might otherwise feel completely overwhelmed by it. But I think that's part of the gift, and that would probably explain why you haven't gone down some kind of laboratory rabbit hole, but instead are trying to use the skills that you have in communication to teach others what they need to learn and mitigate in the process eco-anxiety, or at least hold it and manage it at the same time. And I suppose I'd quite like for you to tell us a bit more about how it feels to be privy to, and on a daily basis having to sort of manage an individual, a human being's relationship with climate change, and seeing how it evolves either for your or both for your one-to-one clients, but also when you're in consultation with a business and you've got a team of people, presumably to varying degrees, who care or don't understand or don't feel that it's central to their role. And that must be quite a novel experience, maybe possibly overwhelming for you? How does that, do you manage that on a day-to-day basis?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah. So the overall is that, you know, a lot of times, particularly in the coaching, I talk about taking people who are generally what I call eco-confused and make them more towards the eco-confident side of the scale. And you know, different people work in different ways, which is why coaching is such a fascinating element of what I do. Because I've had people who say to me, you know, oh, I'm really not sure what to buy. I don't know whether, you know, I'm in the supermarket and I'm not sure which, you know, tomatoes to have. Should I have the ones that are organic or the ones that are local, the ones from Spain, the one with the, you know, the tractor on it, whatever, you know, all the kind of really micro focusing down onto some of their daily challenges, which are really giving them that anxiety. And some things that they can't actually change as well. So if they are in the middle of nowhere, they do have to drive to take their children to school because we don't have a rural bus service everywhere in the UK. So it's about those fundamental choices that we can make, that we can understand ourselves and start educating ourselves with in terms of making better choices. And if that starts with which tomatoes you buy at the supermarket, then once you start understanding, you know, that, yeah, okay, there are different ones that we can choose, for example, ones that are not flown in from another country are usually better. Ones that are not out of season because then they're not grown in heated greenhouses, for example. And all those choices start to build up, but we're not perfect. We're not supposed to be perfect. The whole point of us being worried about our own carbon footprint is because that's exactly what the fossil fuel companies want us to do. They want us to turn their attention away from what they're doing. Don't put any pressure on them, and to be worried about the tomatoes in the supermarket or be worried about taking your children to school. And fundamentally, it's not a bad thing to be conscious of those and trying to make changes and things about saying, well, you know, eventually we could swap to an electric vehicle, or, you know, we could do something different in those circumstances. But don't forget about those bigger systemic changes that we also need to make as society as well. It's about talking with other parents, talking with the school, you know, having those conversations about what choices we can make. Is there another solution where we could have a different way for children to get to school, you know, as a longer term solution? But also, are we voting? Are we voting in terms of who are the people on the PTA or the school board that are making the school itself much more eco-friendly and reduced carbon emissions, etc.? Are we voting for our local councillors? Are we voting for MPs? Are we voting for who's in government as well to change the education system about what the children are being taught in schools regarding the curriculum for climate change? Are we voting in terms of who we buy from on a week to week? That goes back to your tomatoes. Maybe, you know, you don't want to go to the supermarket because they're not actually giving you the information that you need to make those choices about those tomatoes. Maybe you need to think about, who do we support from a local farmer or a local produce outlet, or something that would be much more of an organic and connection with somebody who's maybe doing some more regenerative farming, for example. So there are those conversations when I'm talking to people and saying, you know, great, you know, it's good that you want to recycle by taking your items to the charity shop, but unless you're actually shopping from the charity shop, it's just another form of waste movement. It's not going directly to landfill, but unless you're part of that whole conversation, and when people start to get that idea of what I call sustainability mindset, and it is about saying every single choice that I make is got to be related to carbon or to impacts on biodiversity or water or pollution, then people start to think of it as second nature, which again ties in again with that little nature thought. Instead of saying, how much does this cost in terms of pounds and pence? how much does this cost in terms of my future, my children's future, the world that I want to live in? What does this mean to me in terms of how would I like the the local river to look like, or how would I like it for the air that we breathe? So really getting us to put in those values and those motivations and those drivers to think about those choices that we make, and not sacrificing things, but just getting a different swap, and not trying to be perfect either. There's never going to be a point where we're going to be perfectly sustainable. We don't setting those kind of targets is wrong, because then we will never achieve them and we'll feel disappointed. We need to get to reasonable goals, smart goals. I still use smart goals even though we're talking about people's lifestyles or people's values. And measuring things, yes, we can measure about how much you've reduced your own footprint, but also I use things about how happy people feel. How happy do you feel about your potential retirement now, or how would you like to feel about your potential retirement at the end of working together? Do you feel that there's a more positive future by the things that we're working on? So that's really from a personal coaching point of view. For businesses, it's slightly different. The first rule about climate change is that you don't talk about climate change. And the second rule about climate change is that we don't talk about climate change. So in the UK, the Office of National Statistics says that most of the British adults are concerned about climate change. It was around about 85% a couple of years ago, but with the cost of living crisis, that's come down slightly in terms of how people are prioritizing what they're most concerned about. But we don't talk about it because we don't want to be the weirdo in the room. Being green, being kind of eco-friendly, sometimes for people has got this stereotypical of, sort of a hippie tree hugging kind of like vibe about it. Whereas actually it's just about wanting nice, clean, healthy, sustainable things, like having a river that you could go kayaking on without catching some kind of E. coli or some kind of horrible disease. It would be nice to have you send your children to school, not worry about them having asthma because of the exhaust fumes outside the gate. So really climate change is something that isn't really priority in a lot of people's lives. So when it comes to businesses, it's about understanding what people's drivers are. So sometimes that could be, if you want to be healthier, then a lot of doctors have said for a long time, reduce the amount of processed food that you have, and therefore you will be healthier. It's the same for climate change. Reduce the amount of red meat, it's healthier for everyone. Cycling or walking over, always taking the car again. So when we see businesses start to understand what it means for them in terms of benefits, it's a bit different. And when businesses start winning contracts, when they start saving money, when they start attracting top talent from universities, when they know that their staff aren't going to leave, when they get investment, all down to the fact that they can demonstrate their sustainability, they're all singing and dancing because it gives them a competitive edge. And if companies really want to succeed at the minute, going down the sustainability route is the only way to survive. Last year, the UK economy grew by 0.1%. The green economy grew by 9%. Deborah Meaden said 2 years ago, if you don't have sustainability as part of your business, you will fail. I like to be a bit more positive than Deborah and say, if you do have sustainability as part of your business, you will succeed. So it's about, the people that maybe said in 2000, oh, I don't need a website. It'll be okay. Don't need this newfangled sort of website thing. I won't go on social media in sort of 2008, 2009. No, I don't need a Facebook or an Instagram, things like that. Where are those businesses now? That was a digital revolution. We're having the green revolution now. And unless you want to be a Blockbusters whilst Netflix is around the corner, you'll need to start thinking about how you can move into a more sustainable field and be more comfortable with your sustainability as well. Because most people, when we start looking at it, are already doing lots of things. They're just not very confident in talking about it because it's science. And as we know, science isn't sexy. It isn't easy. And it's quite complicated. So not very many people want to go around leading on the science. And it's something that people aren't very sort of confident in talking about. So hence carbon literacy gives people that basic understanding. And then they can build on that with it. As I say, there's lots of things they're already doing. And then there's some things that they could do that perhaps they're not even aware of. And then there's some of those bigger changes, like I was mentioning about the systemic changes that, you know, not quite there with all the solutions yet, but we can start pushing for change in those directions. So I love it. I mean, I love the fact when people get the penny drops and it's like, and people start going, oh, I love this, you know, and it's like, yes, it seems like, yeah, you know, if you were in the year 2000 and you just did market stall trading and then you were told that you needed a website in order to continue trading, and you know, oh, I don't know what Etsy is and all these kind of things and rah, 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 rah. Whereas most people now, that's the fundamentals of their business. Yes, they do still go out and do market trading, but they still do trading online as well. So this is just the same thing. And as humans, it would be boring if we didn't have challenges every day. That's what we do. We problem solve. That's who we are as a species. Every day we problem solve. This is just another problem and we are going to solve it.
I think, well, I think everyone listening to you will have, I think I've done my job, because the enthusiasm with which you talk about this doesn't cease from one conversation to another with you. It's just as sustainable as anything else, the energy with which you bring. Thank you. And yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, yes, I'm the eternal optimist. Yes, I'm in marketing. And I really like, I was cycling, I got my bike serviced last week, and I have not been able to ride it much because I've had 2 children, and I used to live on my own and cycle absolutely everywhere. I lived more central, and it was just much easier for me to get into the city because, like you, I also fell into the corporate world for 20 years and I've fallen out of it. Not out of love, because another thing I want to talk to you about is sort of, I think we've talked about this before, but doing good from within as opposed to throwing eggs at the bank, which is really important. But if there aren't those of us working from within the system, it won't move forward. So, you know, you and I both come with a corporate background, which actually I'm quite proud of and sort of pleased that I can leverage now. But I was cycling to the city every day, and I was cycling to the city every day. Haven't been able to do that, having had 2 kids. Finally getting my bike out of the shed and serviced, and I think I've probably clocked up 100 miles in a week on it, just out of excitement, to the point where I kind of exhausted myself on Monday, because I cycled from Finchley to Barry's boot camp in Euston, onto the RSA, onto Refugees at Home summer party in the city, and then cycled all the way back at 10:30 at night. It took 70 minutes. I don't think I quite appreciated it. I was completely exhausted, and then had to get up at 5:30 with the kids. So I won't be doing that every day, but the excitement of being back on the bike, and I was, you know, going down a hill, because there's nothing better than, in my case, going up Highgate West Hill, which is a gradient about, let's say, I don't even want to give degrees because I'll embarrass myself on the science front. And then flying down the hill at the other end. And I'm flying down the hill at the other end, like wind in my hair, with my helmet on. And I thought, there's nothing to argue with here. It's cheaper. It's quicker. It is quicker because you've just, you know, you don't have to sit in the traffic in London. It's greener. It's better in terms of calorie burning, and it's more fun. It's more enjoyable. So I mean, there is the safety element of cycling, of course, that somebody could put in front of you. But this is to your point about system change, because the more cycle paths that are put in, the safer it is for cyclists. And so we all need to work together. But my point being, I'm actually really excited. And you know that I came to having a better carbon footprint, not with the intention of having a better carbon footprint. We had to be more creative about the holidays that we were having with our children, because we have children with both eczema and asthma, and one of them has multiple food allergies, which has been a real roller coaster of learning, because of course we're asking, how on earth do our children have so many allergies? And of course climate change probably does play into it, so that's been an interesting area of inquiry for my husband and me. And then it's, what are we going to do, because we're not going to get on flights for a number of reasons, to do with, don't go on holiday with 2 little kids under 4 anyway, it's relatively unpleasant and not worth money and not a holiday. But also with Razzie, it was a case of, we don't really want to get on a flight, we don't really want to end up in some massive hotel with 14 buffets, all of which have people putting spoons from one thing into the other. So what are we going to do? So I went down this rabbit hole of finding good stuff to do near to London, and I have been so not only pleasantly surprised but moved, educated, and I feel I've struck gold with the glamping and the cabins and the just really interesting things there are to do in this country. And I feel like if we hadn't been cornered, as it were, into having to make those decisions, then we would not have been able to surface all this magic that most people feel most people aren't aware of, and fly to other places to get a bit of sun. So I think there's actually a lot to be said about giving people the sense that they might actually, as I call it, be sitting on a gold mine if they do embrace the sustainability life, this new system change, to everything that you've said about employee, let's call it satisfaction. I'm more of a fan of that word than well-being, because I think there's been such a history of, as long as they've got yoga at lunchtime and childcare vouchers, they'll be okay. But it's not. It's about feeling, as Seth Godin would say, part of the song of significance, and how they are actually part of a bigger project, and understanding what that project is. And the same goes for your customers. Don't just give them 10% off the next time they come back. Actually help them understand why what they're doing is really important, so that you can punch with or above the big boys and girls, as I say. And I want to talk to you a bit about that. I've been ranting a bit now, but I'll get to a point where I ask you for your opinion. And that is, I saw yesterday in one of the newsletters that you and I probably both get, I can't remember which one it was, and it was about Wimbledon and Barclays. And there's different ways to go about this. There's the get Barclays away from Wimbledon, they're a terrible sponsor, we've got to do something about it. There's that angle. And then there's another angle which I'm kind of finding that I'm fitting into or more comfortable with, which is, as I say, to try to help those SMEs have a seat at the table. So rather than sort of spending a lot of energy doing shit slinging, which I think is really important as long as it's correct, there's also a lot to be said about energy for bringing those who feel like they've got absolutely no agency or no voice a bit higher up, so that the level, the playing field at the top of corporates is much more level, is much more equal. So can you talk a bit about your thoughts around that, and sort of what is the best use of energy when you are within the system trying to fight it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is always a very, I would say, contentious, but it's always a good, healthy debate within the sustainability society and ecosystem, that, there's lots of different opinions from different sustainability experts. And I guess it's down to a couple of different things. So I know that you've had Dan from My Mother Tree on your podcast before, and he's very much a great person who's looking at, in particular, that example about banks and what they're doing. So fundamentally, there's a great book by a guy called Rasad Souk. It's called Saving the Planet Without the Bullshit. And he basically talks about some of these big systemic, these big, huge things that you and I can't actually influence or really deal with very much, which includes fossil fuel subsidies and the fact that the banks are funding fossil fuel exploration in the billions since the Paris Agreement, and also insurance companies who insure those fossil fuel companies, and pension funds that contribute to them as well. So there's lots of bigger stories out there as well. And I think that it just really, for me, me personally, and when I talk to clients about it as well, there are some banks and insurance companies and some organizations that are really not doing anything, or really are trying to hide what they're doing. And we talked about it a little bit in the Carbon Literacy for Marketing Professionals course, when you've got the different types of greenwashing. And I see a lot with banks, things like green highlighting, like, oh, you know, we'll not talk about all the money that we're giving to the fossil fuel companies. We'll talk about this money that we're giving to SMEs and for their green financing, and we'll talk about that, which is a tiny percentage of what they're doing and their money, and just completely ignoring and not actually changing either the amount of money that they're giving to these fossil fuel companies. So those ones, yeah, I mean, I really sort of have to kind of say that there's some that are fundamentally not going to change and don't seem to be changing and don't want to change. And that's a real cultural inset. Then there's the ones that kind of float around in the middle, the ones that kind of used to be like that, or still do fund fossil fuel companies but are moving away. They're not so bad, but they're still not quite in the right space. And I think those ones we can do something more about. And that is about when you can have conversations with these people. It's a bit like if you've got a supply chain as well. You know, there's some suppliers that are being kicked out of big companies because they're not changing. And so that these bigger companies are saying, well, you can't be a supplier anymore. And it's the same as us as you know, as customers and clients from a personal point of view. So, but there are organizations you can talk to and say, you know, look, this is important to me. And if enough of us say that, then those businesses will start to, you know, make more and more changes and move more towards the right end of the scale. Then there's the ones, and these are usually kind of fairly new businesses, or businesses that have always been like this, that are now more popular. You get to see a lot of it in Ethical Consumer magazine as well, to see who's on the sort of good end of the scale, and also, you know, the work like Dan does to bring that information out to people. And those are the businesses that say, well, you know, if you can, move to those. Some people can't because of various different constrictions, you know, but if you can move to those, support those ones that have got that mindset. They have completely designed their whole business, their whole culture, everything around this idea, not just for sustainability for the planet, for the people, which also affects their profit. That gives them that purpose as to why they exist as a business. And this is why this sector is growing, because people are willing to pay more for something that's going to protect their future.
But I also think you don't have to pay more. I think this is one of the misnomers, is that like this is a white middle class privileged issue where those of us that have got a bit of space, time and a bit more cash, which by the way we may or may not have, frankly, it's just, you know, that is in itself a stereotype. But yes, you know, for the sake of assumption that there is a group of people that do have more time and energy and cash available, it's fair that, you know, there would be a misunderstanding that this conversation is not for those that are not in that category. But that's just not true, because there's lots of products. I haven't done exhaustive research because I don't have loads and loads of time, but the little research that I have done has made it possible for me to see that there are alternatives for things that we buy for our house, or ways to travel. And I think the school run's a really good example, because it's very easy to feel quite prickly and protective as a mother or father who's trying to get their two wily children to school on time, to just shut off and stop listening to somebody who tells them to walk or cycle or get the bus, when they could just as easily get in a car, which, you know, as you say, is not going to break the world. You know what I mean? So, but I think there's an education as to or around, it isn't sort of financially unattainable for a lot of people to make these small and very exciting, feel good, die feeling like you've done something for the planet feelings. And that quick shift that you can make without breaking the bank is really, that's the gold dust. That's the stuff that I get frustrated not more people know about, if you see what I mean. And that's our job, is to kind of talk about this stuff so that more people know that it's possible, and there's a kind of like way through the matrix that you didn't realize. There's like a trap door which allows you to have a much happier life that doesn't cost that much more. that people don't seem to be aware of, which I find really bizarre.
It's almost like I compare it a little bit to like the to-do list. You always think about the things that you have got to do. You forget about all the things that you've already done, that they're already on the completed list. And yes, there's lots of things that people are already doing, and especially people who don't have that stereotypical background that you discussed, that they aren't celebrating or being celebrated for. Or acknowledging. And I think from a coaching perspective, it's really interesting to say things like, if you do get the bus, or if, look at all the emotions you spoke about from cycling. And having that healthier lifestyle. And yes, there's lots of different ways that people can do things. I mean, my sister and I were just at a refill store last week that has coffee in the park and all this kind of stuff. And I was asking them about their sunscreen that they had, based on the fact that I was in the Guardian article talking about plastic-free
I was going to plug
holidays.
that for you, but you beat me to it.
I managed to get it in there. But the point of that was that, my sister, we're not from a hugely privileged background or anything like this. We don't have huge salaries. And I was asking, and he said, oh, it's a bit expensive at £19 for some sun cream. And then he went on to explain about how, you work it in like a balm. So it kind of, it a little bit goes a lot further rather than slavering it all on. You kind of moisturize it in. So it lasted him, him and his partner whole holiday when they were in India for 3 weeks. But my sister said, oh, £19 isn't expensive for a sun cream. So, it's that thing of it's sometimes it's just about making those better choices. And things like food waste, the huge amount of food waste that we have in the UK, for an average family, it's at least £60 per month.
Yeah.
And that was done a few years ago. So it's probably closer to 120 now with the increase in prices, etc. So, just thinking about all the things that our parents or grandparents used to do, in terms of meal planning, batch cooking, using
Having said that,
freezer.
there's nothing more annoying than trying to feed a 4- and 6-year-old, because you cannot control whether they're going to eat it or not. And so I think there's a lot of room in this conversation for compassion to, and look, it's only because I'm right there right now, but actually we've been told by a dietitian that Razzie should be having fish fingers 3 times a week, and that's music to the ears of a parent who tries to make a nice bolognese and they throw it in the garden. Don't bother, so there's a lot of meeting people where they are. And
100%.
if like food waste and like skipping to school isn't the thing that's going to make someone feel anything other than completely overwhelmed, ashamed and angry, then pick the thing. Like, we just bought one of those water haul rubbish pickers that are designed, they're made out of recycled fishing nets, and they're designed for picking stuff up. But that makes for a nice Saturday morning stroll, because everyone wants to have the litter picker and to pick stuff off, so we're kind of trying to gamify things that we think the kids might enjoy, spend less money on schlepping them into town to do something they don't want to do, get them out into nature. So a lot of this, as our job is to meet people where they are. And also, a lot of businesses would not have even survived, couldn't possibly survive. You talk about bigger picture things going on, the war with Ukraine. Anyone who's watched Clarkson's Farm will know that the kind of war in Ukraine will have dictated prices in the market. It's bloody hard to be a farmer at the best of times, but it's nigh impossible now. So if you're having to pivot your land, if you're having to think about other things to do with it, we need to meet people where they are, make them feel less shame around having inherited a farm which their grandfather thought they were going to be farming maize on for the rest of eternity, that they realize they're just not going to be able to do anymore, that they decide they want to rewild, they decide they want to turn into a glamping site. Not only is that okay, and to kind of hold space for the shame that might come up when you think about what's expected of you from an intergenerational point of view, but it's also really exciting, because actually it can catapult you into a much more meaningful place in terms of financial success than you may well have been if you'd continued to try and farm the land again and again in a crap soil that was never meant to be arable. So there's some
Yes.
really exciting opportunities for people to
Oh,
circumnavigate the system and do
yeah.
much more and sit on this table. Like, never, the banks that are rubbish, you know, we can and do need to kind of talk to and talk at. But if we can get enough businesses to be sitting, you know, sort of at the same level, then we're completely watering down the effect that those banks are going to have. And that might, in my mind, be a much, well, an equally useful activity. You see what I mean?
Oh, it's already happening. Yeah, I mean, and just to reference Jezza there, you know, at his on his TV show, yeah, even Jeremy Clarkson is now doing regenerative farming. You know, he's been sold the concept. He's aware of the fact that there's only 40 more harvests available in the soil, which is, you know, a pretty devastating scenario for all of humanity, because then we won't have any food if we don't actually, you know, look after our soil. But yeah, there's people like Isabella Tree from the Net Estate that she's got a film as well as a book about the rewilding that they did, and yeah, that was a massive thing to take on their grandparents' estate,
Yeah.
and then yeah, just have to completely abandon every single thing that they were doing and not go back to what the, you know, old-fashioned farming was in the Victorian age. It was going past that. It was going to sort of, you know, Elizabethan times, Henry VIII, to really understand what farming was meant to be like in the UK, and how we can actually bring back our nature to the levels that it should be at, as opposed to the already devastated levels that we've started monitoring from the 1970s. So yeah, so there's definitely a case of making society fairer. And this is exactly where we're talking about in terms of, you know, not having huge, massive, you know, pan-global businesses that don't pay their taxes, who are dictating in sort of, you know, very much in control of a lot of the consumerism that we have
Right.
in the UK, and giving it back into those small businesses, you know, putting our supply chains more local as well, you know, having independent businesses have much more of a share of the market, you know, giving people that sense of having something nice to go to when they go to their local shops and their local markets and things like that, because
And
it's
to
all
be involved in
different.
them and to be so
Yeah.
to have something nice. I think we're talking about the, you know, the inclusivity and democratization of the entire world. And when people on the one
Mm.
hand are talking about inclusivity and diversity, which is super important, I actually would like to see a lot more conversation about how carbon literacy or climate change, well, yeah, positive carbon footprint behavior, I don't know what the right way to describe it is very, very aligned with democratization
Climate
and
justice is what we're saying.
climate justice. Is that the
Yes.
encompassing phrase I'm looking for?
Yes, so this is about sort of, you know, when we're looking at solutions and trying to make the world a better place from a climate perspective, we also need to look at it through, you know, a social lens as well, and talking about that. We don't just want to make it great from a climate perspective. We also want to make sure that it's fairer for everybody from all different
But I think
perspectives.
it
So
does. I
yeah.
think what you're saying is it needs to take into account. But what I'm saying is invariably, if we get
Hmm.
some of the sort of SMEs up there on the table, and if
Hmm.
we're getting some of the landowners to do better, but at the same time open up land that was frankly, you know, ring fenced off from normal people in the village, then actually just by default, we are democratizing the world, you know, by way of the environment. You see what I
Yeah.
mean?
We're making it more of a, I think we've lost connection with each other. I think that's a big thing. And there is somebody actually who's only a few fields away from where I am that I've been in touch with, and he's looking at doing some regenerative stuff. And you know, it's about saying, I want other people to come and find out what I'm doing. And, you know, he's also a business owner as well. So it's about, you know, maybe people from local businesses could come and they could
Yeah.
sponsor different things, and you know, a day's out for those those companies, etc. So I really think it's about trying to bring back our connections within our communities and break down some of those, you know, sort of barriers of, you know, where we are and who we are, and kind of, yes, have much more of that sense of community and, yeah, fairness, and, you know, allowing us to kind of have that that sense of being in nature, because we are nature. You know,
This is where
we've
Annie and
lost a
I are
lot.
at risk sounding to corporate wankers as if we're just hippie idiots. But I think there's something to be said for when you come from a spiritual background or some kind of appreciation, a hippie background of the concept of synchronicity. Plus, here's the bit of the equation that's really interesting. You've got a corporate background. Synchronicity plus sort of stealthy design and strategy equals less money, more people happy, more people involved. So to give you an example, home farm glamping in Hertfordshire, or a place I might be interviewing the managing director of a lovely farm called Loddington Farm in Kent, which produce Owlet apple juice. You know, these guys are all being really clever about the sort of use of their land and then commercializing it, involving, as you say, corporate teams in, you know, hedgerow maintenance, and, you know, therefore educating them about rewilding. And, you know, if you're really clever and you can appreciate that, yeah, things happening at the right time with the right people dovetailing and all that kind of hippie bullshit actually makes for a lot more sense, a lot less money, a lot more, less in silo stuff, which is the other thing that really irritates me when you're in marketing and communications, is this team going off and talking about this toxic bullshit, that team using a completely different story to make people feel happy and, you know, stroking their egos, and you've got a whole other like corporate sponsorship strategy going on over here with your community that helps people, you know, in this particular community that's got nothing to do with the story. That drives me mad. And this way you can have this one story of change with regards to environmental well-being, and it can underpin a number of strategies that actually make it much better as a business, much more coherent.
Yes, that's exactly what we say. So you know, the worst thing that you can do is say, oh yes, we do sustainability and it sits over here. You know, it's like health and safety. Health and safety doesn't sit in the corner and, you know, it gets waved to occasionally. It underpins every single part of the business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, you would not be able to operate. And net zero is the same thing. People don't understand that by 2050, you know, you will not be able to operate unless you are,
I'm only
you know,
smiling because you remember
certified.
that bit in Clarkson's Farm where Caleb is geared up with all his health and safety stuff so much that he forgets he's tied to the cherry picker and gets out of it and slams his hip or head against, you know, and the irony being that it was the health and safety wear
Of
that was
course,
actually the thing that
yeah, of course,
damaged him.
of course, yeah. Well, it's one of those. Yeah, it is that. Yeah, you know, it is something that has to be applied to everything. And sustainability is the same thing. Every job is a green job, whether you're the CEO or the person that is, you know, in the marketing department, or somebody that's in finance, whoever it is, across the whole of the organization, across the suppliers, every single job is a green job. And it's responsibility as well, it's ownership, it's about making sure that you can contribute. You know, a lot of the time when you talk to businesses that have gone through sustainability transformations, you know, the employees are all singing and dancing. You know, I was at an event recently and they kept asking the representative from the business what they really liked about the process that they've gone through, and they'd, oh well, we've got a 4-day week now, and you know, every single answer was about how they had a 4-day week.
Look, I think people are inherently, us included, yeah, selfish humans, and that's something to be taken very seriously, and to, you know, it's worth being compassionate about. And part of my work is to really, you know, sit down with a founder and say, I'm actually in this for you. This might as well be therapy, because if
Yes.
you're really honest, you want to die feeling like you've done something for the planet.
Yes.
You want
Yep.
to walk away
Yep.
from this business that you inherited, and frankly, you'd rather just hang out with your kids now and just be done with it because you're exhausted. So let's focus on that. And actually, you can come up with this legacy plan, which
Yes.
everyone's going to be happy with. And you're the one who's going to feel like you've really done good work. But ultimately, selfishly, it's because you've got your own needs, wants, limits, boundaries, and agenda. And that's okay. We can work with that, you know, rather than people at the top feeling so completely overwhelmed with all this responsibility for their people, for their customers, for the planet, for their families. It's like, it's a lot, basically. And it's
It
those
is.
people I want to help.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, the majority of employees want to enhance their green skills. You know, employees are leaving businesses if companies are not demonstrating their commitments to net zero. So, you know,
Yeah,
as a responsible business owner, you don't have to take all of the responsibility
that's true
because,
too.
you know,
Yeah.
your employees want to
Want
do
to.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I will often like think about people like last night. I actually went to my community group reading group meeting at the library, and there was a car there that said "Pave the World" out on the vehicle. And I was like, okay, so where next then? Once you've paved the world, what's your next target? And it was kind of like that really sort of depressing moment. And you know, when you want to relax, when you go to a spa, or you went to, you know, you go to anywhere that's got that kind of, you know, oh, let's chill out. All of the sounds that you hear are nature sounds.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's the crashing of the waves, or it's the whales, or it's the rainforest and all those things. And you know, so these are the juxtapositions that we're in. The people that want to pave the world, but is that a realistic target? And then what happens
But they're
then?
not
You're out
happy.
of business.
We're
Yeah.
getting, you know, we've got to wrap up because I'm mindful of your
Yes.
time, but we, you know, we're getting into the next level of this conversation, which is all about what people want and what, you know, giving people what they want, but serving them what they need. And the education piece for those poor people who think it is all about paving the world, an opportunity to do something other than that, whatever that actually means. You know, and it's not so much that it's an us and them situation as far as I'm concerned. I'm really trying to employ the "it's not your fault" headline as much as I possibly can,
Oh,
mainly
yes.
so as to kind of personally survive emotionally from what's going on in the world. Um, because I think if you consider that people doing things that we just can't quite understand are probably doing it from a place of deep trauma, then at least we can, rather than pointing fingers, screaming, being angry, and getting more and more binary on social media, we can try
Mm.
and sort of empathize and sort of provide other creative permission slips for people to live life another way. So yeah,
Oh,
that's, like I say, a whole other conversation, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, yeah, just to sort of like, yeah, come to a conclusion on that. Um, you know, I think that very much that people are genuinely, you know, wanting to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, as we talked about in the course, you know, people greenwash, and then most of the time when they do, it's unintentional greenwashing.
And that's what
So
everyone's so scared about, isn't
yes,
it? Yeah.
yeah. But if we've got the right intentions, if we want to do the right thing, and this is where I come back to, you know, why we love recycling. So there was a piece of research about why people like to do recycling, and it's because felt like they were doing the right thing for the right reasons, even though it doesn't make sense from a human evolution point of view that we should just put all of the rubbish into the same receptacle. Wasting time on separating it isn't actually a good use of our time and resources as a human in terms of us as a species from a normal perspective. And Aristotle said that the secret to happiness was doing the right thing for the right reasons. So if we are given the opportunities to understand what the right things are, because there's a lot of people that don't know that they're doing something that isn't great, or what the alternatives are. And this is where
Yeah.
it comes back to the education piece. And if we facilitate them to be able to do the right things by putting in cycle lanes or making things a little bit more affordable that aren't, you know, currently in terms of sustainable choices, or, you know, giving them those options more easily,
Yeah.
then that means that we are going to have a happier situation, because people are then able to do the right things because they know what they're doing, and also to do them more easily for the right reasons. So
that's why I think
there
the
we
buck
go.
stops with us marketeers, and why we're in a really, really bloody lucky position right now, because we are the ones who can cheerlead, we're the ones that can educate, we're the ones that can share, you know, we're
All
the ones that
those
understand
ideas.
affiliate marketing, influencer marketing, all these things that people, I think, wrongly, sort of see go alongside toxic marketing bullshit, 10x your income bollocks. Excuse my French, everybody. But actually, you can use exactly the same marketing technology, if you like, to do really, really good stuff to kind of make more people feel more included, you know, get the right things, do better things,
Yeah.
make better choices. And so I'm really excited about where we are right now, but I see it as a duty. I do see it as a duty and privilege that we come with 20 years or more, in your case, experience of working in this world, perhaps therefore not feeling quite as eco anxious just because we've seen it for a bit longer. And you know, it's our job to hold people and meet them where they are and do what we can. So
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going full circle. You know, we started at the beginning talking about, you know, eco anxiety, about personal choices and personal carbon footprint. And that was because Ogilvy had done a campaign for BP, who used a piece of research by two Canadian guys called Rees and Wackernagel, sorry, Wackernagel's Swiss, to popularize the idea of a carbon footprint. So it kind of has backfired in
I
terms of
shouldn't have
now
said
everybody's.
carbon footprint. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. There's
That's okay. So the marketing job there to actually make people more conscious of it is now why we're in a position to understand what it is and to be mindful of it and to know what that term is, because again, it's a bit complicated and a bit sciencey and a bit boring. But so it has come from a marketing position from the fossil fuel company, but now we're in a stronger position to hold them accountable for their carbon footprint and
they probably feel a lot more different, people working at Ogilvy and all the other big ad agencies, about what was going on 20 years ago, because guess what, it's not their fault, right? And we're all in this position now. Listen, if you want to know more about, you know, a lot of the acronyms, a lot of the random stories through history of advertising, a lot of the science, but you know, bite-sized chunks of it in a palatable way, then Annie, tell us where the best place to go for people to start where I did at the basic level of carbon literacy is, and then to learn more about what else you can offer if somebody's a custodian of a business, as I call them, or business leader or founder.
Yeah, so if you you can always just, you know, literally just drop me an email. We can always have a chat. And so I'm Annie at the sustainablelifecoach.com. If you want to get me on an email, you can always visit my website at the sustainablelifecoach.com as well. I'm on Instagram at sustainablelifecoach. Don't really use X or Twitter, but it's Sust Life Coach there. I still get the messages. So just give me a contact and we can have a chat. The fundamental thing is to get that knowledge down. If you're not already climate savvy, take part in a carbon literacy course. We're almost at 100,000 people certified, whoop, whoop, very shortly, to be carbon literate. So that means that everybody's jumping into getting that lovely certificate as part of their CV and part of that LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, I can do webinars, lunch and learns. I've done a lot of those recently for businesses to get them to start to see what the employees are interested in, and then we can develop other topics going forward based on that. Workshops to start if you really have got no idea. Very low cost, very low time workshops, 2 hours to get you started on a sustainability journey. Very simple, very easy to do. Otherwise, if you're ready, if you really want to commit to this, get ahead of the game, get those bids, get those contracts won, get all the advantages, get your investors in there, get all of that on board in a 12-month program, which isn't that intensive, so it's easy to fit around the rest of your job. And get that certified and get that nice SECR report. That's the accelerator program, and that's now on a rolling month-by-month basis. So you can join any time. We can have a little conversation about that. And as well, if you're looking to get from eco-confused to eco-confident, talk to me about some coaching, whether it's for your business point of view in terms of strategy, or wanting to get your partners on board, or looking at a whole new product development, or whether it's just you and you're talking about, I just need to get my kids something to eat, or I want to be more confident in talking about investments or cycling or whatever it is from a personal perspective, I can help you along the way as well. And it's not just about doing the coaching, it's about enabling you to continue this, because this is a lifelong journey. Every single day is school when it comes to sustainability, because there's always something new and exciting happening. So it's about empowering you with the tools, the apps, the resources, the community. If you really want to find out what it's like to be part of the cool gang, join the next People Planet Pint where you are. I'm the host for Newcastle. This is a sustainability meetup for anybody interested in sustainability. It's free. There's around 50 every month, so there should be one near you sometime soon. They're all across the UK, but also now in places like Honolulu, in Belgrade, in Auckland. So they're really taking off across the world. And it's just a great way to meet other people if you just want to find somebody to have a little bit of a rant with, or to ask questions. You get a free drink. It doesn't have to be a pint. You can have a cup of tea if you want to for the first three people that get there. And we're all lovely people, and it's just a nice time to just go and talk to somebody about some of the issues that you might have, and just get started and feel a little bit more confident that you're not the only person in the room. Everybody else is concerned about it. We just don't talk about it enough. So those are all the options that you can do too. And it'd be great to see anybody in real life if they do want to pop along to the Newcastle one. Otherwise, yeah, hope to connect with other people online and all that kind of stuff. But thank you so much, Frances, for the opportunity just to delve into some of the things that we've been talking about.
Welcome. I'm going to get you to send me a link to the Guardian article as well, because I'll make sure to pop that in to these show notes as well. And Annie, thank you so much. Your enthusiasm is just so infectious. Was on the course, is today.
Thank you.
And yeah, lovely to have you on as a guest. I shall
see
you all soon at the next.
Yes.
Take care.
Take care.